In last week's video on the flexible binding, we covered the book in leather and opened the covers carefully for the first time. Today we'll correct warping of the boards, fill in between the turn-ins, and put down the paste downs. I'll show an overview of doing the Cambridge panel style decoration, but we'll leave the details to a dedicated video. Having opened the covers for the first time, we can see the leather has warped the boards outwards slightly. This is not unusual and is easily rectified by pasting a draw sheet inside the boards. Before I do that, I'll trim out the turn-ins to make them even. I'll use some dividers to find the narrowest part of the turn-in and then make prick marks around all the turn-ins to this width. I then cut the leather along these marks and peel the excess leather off. If it takes some paper width, that's fine. It's a very thin layer and we'll add more in a moment. I didn't have paste made up, so I used methyl cellulose. The methyl cell holds the moisture a bit better than paste, so it just takes the paper a bit longer to relax and stretch. I cut the paper a few millimeters shorter than the width, knowing it would stretch about this much. Once the draw sheets are in place, I let it dry overnight. Once the draw sheets have dried, I find that one of the boards still has a slight outwards warp. but the fill-in card will draw slightly, which will correct this. By filling in inside the leather with some light card the same thickness as the leather, the edge of the turn-ins won't be noticeable under the paste downs. Because I pared the leather thin and I've added a draw sheet, only a thin card is needed. I'm using 10-point card, which is about 0.3 of a millimetre thick. Gluing the fill-ins in place, if I was worried about them pulling the boards too much, I would use PVA and position the card quickly so it doesn't have time to stretch. Once in place, the boards will quickly draw moisture out of the card, slowing or stopping any further stretching. I think I wanted a bit of additional pull from the fill-in, so I used methyl cellulose as the adhesive. Methyl cell also has the advantage that if you get the positioning a bit off, you can reposition the fill-in. After the fill-ins have dried, the boards have a slight inwards warp. Hopefully it's not too much, as we still have to put down the end papers. But a slight inwards warp is the final state I'm aiming for. For the Cambridge panel style design, I follow the instructions in an article by Nick Collishaw. There is a link in the description below to his article. I make a stencil and use this to sprinkle the panels on the covers. The inside panel is usually darker than the outside frame. I then blind tool in the panels with some decorative elements using warm finishing tools with moist leather. Using moisture and warm tools draws out a warm colour from the leather. I use a jiggering motion to polish the lines. I'm using a leather creasing tool instead of a bookbinder's finishing tool, and I believe this would not have been uncommon in the period this style of book is from. Once the leather is dried, I give it a coating of Hewitt's leather dressing, which I polish after this has also dried. As I've already mentioned, I'll do a standalone video on the finishing of this book. The last job is to put down the end papers. I'll remove the capping paper and then tear out the waste sheets. By pulling the waste sheet directly up, starting at one end and pushing down at the spine edge of the sheet with your other hand, the waste sheet should tear out cleanly. Some bits of paper are usually left behind, and I use a pair of tweezers to remove these. I then clean up any small bumps and ease the sharp edge of the board with some fine sandpaper. Be careful not to sand through the slips. I'll use methyl cellulose, or paste if you have it made up, to put down the bulk of the end paper. I paste out the paper and then let it relax for a minute and then give it a final coating of adhesive. But I'll use PVA in the hinge area, as the fast, strong tack of the PVA will make working the paper down into the hinge easier, and it's less likely to delaminate later when the boards are closed. I start by pasting out the bulk of the paper and then apply the PVA in the hinge area. I draw the paper over onto the board and work the paper down into the hinge with the back of my pointing finger. Using your thumb and pointing finger will get a nice sharp crease over the edge of the board. Leave the paste down dry with the board open. When closing the board for the first time, take your time and watch for any signs of the paper popping up in the hinge area. If it starts to lift, use a bone folder to hold it in place as the boards are completely closed. Now repeat the process for the other end paper. Once the last paste down is dried and we've closed that board for the first time, we then open the book in the usual manner for the first time. I guess there are a couple of ways of doing this, and I usually open a dozen or so pages at a time from front and back, meeting in the middle. And that is the flexible binding in full leather finally completed. Thanks for sticking with me for this more advanced project. I'll do a full video on the Cambridge panel style finishing, hopefully next week. As always, I really appreciate you hitting the big thumbs up button. If you're able and want to, you can support the making of more videos like this through Patreon or with a one-off contribution, and the details are in the description below. To find videos I've made on specific topics or other projects, the best place to go is the Daz Bookbinding Video Guide. It's the index to the channel, and there is a link in the description below. If you want to be notified of my future videos, please hit the subscribe button and select the notification bell. Until next time, cheerio.